And welcome to 50 Movies in 50 Weeks, the Horror Invasion, where this year I try to get through all 50 movies in this Mill Creek box set in 50 weeks. Now, I am gonna not call this the Horror Invasion for the next 49 videos because you really got to enunciate a lot of those vowels and consonants to avoid sounding like you're saying something else. So I'm just going to say 50 movies in 50 weeks. But the previous 2 years, I did the Sci-fi Invasion, where I did these two box sets. So I've already done this for over 100 movies in 100 weeks. I'm excited for this one because just looking at the movies, I think we have a lot better selection of stuff to go through here. And we're starting off with one of the best public domain horror movies out there. And I actually have a couple copies of it. Carnival of Souls is our first movie. And what a first movie to start off with. I also have a Riff Tracks version of it. Sadly, do not own the Criterion Collection version of it. I really want to. I know the movie's in the public domain, but it's such a fantastic film. Such a great example of guerrilla filmmaking. It's a very inspiring movie if you're into filmmaking. So I've always really liked it. Even as a kid, when it would always come on like those bad movie box sets, I'd always watch it and I'm like, man, this movie's really interesting. It feels like a Twilight Zone episode. And while I was watching it this time, I was reading that this is an adaptation of a Twilight Zone episode. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I don't recall any Twilight Zone episode like this. And I'm looking into it and it says it's an adaptation of the French foreign film titled An Occurrence on Owl Creek Bridge that was later re-edited and dubbed for the Twilight Zone. And I'm like, wow, there's a lot of degrees to this. So I go and watch the Twilight Zone episode, and really I don't see the connection. It's so vague. To say this is an adaptation of it, I think is just kind of like a game of telephone that somehow wound up on like every page I've read about this. I don't think this is an adaptation. I think it's clearly inspired by, but it's so different that I disagree with the assessment that this is a remake of the Twilight Zone episode. Very little to do with An Occurrence on Owl Creek Bridge. And I'll discuss the two different stories. An Occurrence on Owl Creek Bridge involves a soldier who deserted his post. I actually remember reading this short story in high school. But it was about a soldier that deserted his post and was being hung off of Owl Creek Bridge. And in the moments before his death, he fantasizes about escaping and like what he would do if he could escape this thing. And he imagines this whole scenario where the rope that he's being hung with breaks and he's able to swim away. It's a pretty interesting little short story. It's a pretty interesting episode of The Twilight Zone. Very little dialogue. It's fun. Carnival of Souls, on the other hand, there is a bridge. Two cars full of teens are racing on the bridge, and the car full of girls flies off the bridge. And presumably all die until one of the girls, an organist, survives, appearingly, and she just wants to get out of town. She feels like she just needs to run away. And she gets a job as an organist somewhere else near this abandoned carnival. And she keeps on having hallucinations that these ghoulish people partying at the carnival want her to join them. And pretty much the whole movie is some interesting elements where is she going insane? There's a part of the movie where everyone doesn't seem to recognize her or even acknowledge her existence and is freaking her out. She sees a psychiatrist. There's a bunch of colorful characters in this movie. There's a unhygienic man who's constantly hitting on her and he makes her feel uncomfortable, but the ghouls that she is seeing scare her so much that she goes on a date with him just so she's not alone. And it's a pretty tragic scene when it happens because she's like breaking down and she's like, please don't let me be alone. And he's angry. And there's a little old woman who is her, like, it's kind of like a bed and breakfast that she's staying at. She's kind of a fun character because she seems so eccentric, but in a very realistic way. Like, I feel like I've met this person. And there's a point in the movie where our main character is so hysterical that it's even freaking her out, and she's a bit of a weirdo herself. And there's a lot of interesting elements to this. The movie kind of plays out like, for a modern viewer, this movie kind of plays out like an indie horror game. But there's enough interesting like drama and characterization that I think it elevates it from your typical public domain fare. It's an excellent movie. It's well deserving of its Criterion collection. There's only 2 movies I know of that got the Criterion treatment that are in the public domain, and that's Night of the Living Dead, one of the best public domain horror movie out there, and then there's this one, and I think they're just as deserving for that status. I own Night of the Living Dead Criterion collection. I don't own this one, and that's something I should probably remedy soon. This is actually surprisingly a very good print of the movie. For these box sets are not known to carry the best prints of the movie. And certainly there is better prints of Carnival of Souls out there. But if this is your first time watching it, this is not a bad print to start off with. I mean, it's not high definition, it's crammed on a double-sided DVD, but the movie still works, it's still entertaining. It's not as good as the print on this DVD, and I'm sure these pale in comparison to the Criterion, but I think that was something to note. Briefly, I want to talk about the editing in the movie. A lot of these scenes kind of go on a little too long. There's a lot of moments without music, and I think that could be mistaken for amateur filmmaking, or maybe it rightfully so. Maybe it is just amateur. But I think it adds to the atmosphere. It makes it feel more creepy. And I gotta say, something I'm not sure if I've ever noticed on previous viewings, but I did notice it this time, is the transitions. This seems like a very thought out movie. Because I typically have my entertainment cap on when I watch this movie. I had my critical viewing cap while watching this one. And I noticed how the scenes kind of build off each other through the transitions. Everything kind of builds off itself. And I don't know. I thought I'd bring it up because I'm doing a review for it. But yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about this one. We're starting off the year great. This was a fantastic movie. Far beyond the some of the stuff we're probably going to get in the next 49 weeks. But yeah, I love this movie. If you haven't seen it already, I strongly recommend you check it out. And if you don't believe me that it doesn't seem like a remake of An Occurrence on Owl Creek Bridge, go check out that Twilight Zone episode yourself. I think they're very, very different. But that's it for now. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next week. Remember, please be kind and rewind.